jump straight right into it. First things first, I want to know who is the best British prospects that you think we've got to look forward to in 2022. Don't have to have a certain amount of fights. It's up to you. But I'm just kind of interested in who's going to have like a breakout year. Who are we going to be talking about this time next year as someone who could maybe be kind of doing big things in 2023? Just any weight division. Who's on your mind? Elliot, I'm gonna jump to you first.
When you first said this, I mean, it's hard. It feels a bit like cliche to say it, but obviously one of the guys I've been very impressed with is also Dennis McCann. I think he'll have a great year next year again. Just keep building on where he's going. Very impressed with his performances over this last year. I also think going into other guys potentially as well, I quite like the look of Herbie Price. I think he'll have a good year next year. And I've been looking like some of the fighters. I mean, he seems to fought some live fighters with kind of winning records over the last couple of fights as well. So I'm kind of impressed by that. Those are probably my two. I think McCann's obviously more well known now, so I'm not sure whether I can necessarily put him as a sort of breakout prospect, but just on talent alone, I like watching him. But yeah, with the lack of fights and the young age, I think Price is 21. I think he'll have a good year next year as well.
Nice one. So now Herbie Price had a good win on the Josh Warrington undercard at Headingley a few months ago. Against
that was the same fight, yeah.
Yeah, a guy with
very impressed with that. 16-1.
Yeah, I think that was his sixth fight as well. But what I find interesting about Herbie Price is he's still very young. I'm waiting without sounding weird. I'm waiting for like his body to develop, and I'm interested in where his weight's going to be in 4 or 5 years time. So if he does get to world level, what sort of weight he's going to be. But I agree with you. He's a major prospect. And I'm looking at some of the other super bantam weights in Britain now, such as Jason Cunningham, who's obviously kind of British Commonwealth champion, Gamal Yafai, who's achieved a lot. I think you kind of got to say in maybe not 12 months, but in 18 months, do you think he could be on the level of those guys challenging for British titles? Or do you think that's still a little
Herbie Price we're talking about?
Yeah.
Again, to be honest, I totally agree with what you're saying. Like, without wishing to, discuss him shirtless too much, I think we do need to see him develop a bit more as well.
Yeah.
But I think within 18 months, I mean, what is he, 21 now? Yeah, I think within 18 months you can start seeing him approaching British level, or at least be kind of in and around that conversation. Yeah. I wouldn't, want to see him rush to that at this stage. But I think, like you said, that win on the Warrington undercard was very impressive. It was almost like a breakout win.
Yeah.
You sort of like, crikey, I wasn't necessarily expecting it to. I mean, I know obviously, it was obviously the TKO win as well. So he obviously carries power. So you're like, that was surprising, very surprising. So maybe he could come on sooner than that, but I wouldn't like to see him necessarily rushed into it. But I think 18 months is probably a good time for him. Maybe fight 3 times next year again, bring himself up maybe. I mean, what would that would take him to? That would take him to 9 fights then. So maybe still a bit soon. But I mean, for those British title level, you're looking at around 10 to 15 fights on you to get to those sort of fights. So I think he'd definitely be approaching it. Yeah, maybe the end of next year. Maybe it's a year too early. Maybe British level 23, maybe 2023 sort of time.
It's going to be interesting how he's managed, but I feel like Dave Colwell as his trainer under the Matchroom banner, I think he's in good hands. But it'll be interesting to see how fast he's pushed. You also mentioned Dennis McCann there, who's in the bantamweight division. As you mentioned, kind of a lot of people know a bit about him. He's been on TV quite a few times, picked up some good wins. A big British fight that looks like it's going to happen next year is the McGregor-Cash Farouk rematch. Maybe it could be difficult because they're on different banners, but do you think that next year McCann could maybe get in that mix, or do you think that's more likely for 2023?
I think he could. I think he could. To be honest, I think he's a serious talent. Displayed that already. I kind of feel like, I suppose there are some rough edges that need to be sort of straightened out a bit with him as well. I mean, but the fluidity of movement that he's got, to be honest, really impressed me last time out as well. And I think he's just developing all the time. I think within the next year, he'll be almost. It reminds me a bit of like a sort of a Sonny Edwards in a way. Like you're looking at him kind of like precocious talent, really. Like doesn't really have, or even like maybe a bit of a Lee McGregor, where you sort of come not that many wins on his record, not that many fights on his record, but you can just tell immediately that he's going places. So I think it'd be interesting to see how he is matched actually over the next year, because from what I can see from the performances this year, I mean, he fought 3 times this year, I think it is, against guys 20-4, 15-4 points and TKOs. You're looking at that, and that's guys that are far more experienced than he's just sort of making it look relatively easy. So I think you could definitely mix it with those guys that you mentioned. Just be interesting whether they decide to hold him back or not for a bit longer.
Yeah, I was going to agree with you on that point. I feel like the wins he's had, he's made them look effortless as well. I've always kind of noticed in his post-fight interviews, he looks like he's just kind of gone for a run or something that. It looked quite straightforward. But yeah,
which all looks about 12. And you're like, like you just like jogged off like the school playing, knocked out some bloke and jogged back in for like another game of like Wembley doubles, and then you're like,
definitely. Interesting to hear your opinion on that, mate. Paul, going to come to you now, mate. Interested to see who your prospect's going to be. Who is it?
So, because I didn't really know how many fights I could kind of push it to as to what they've already had. I've gone for Dalton Smith because I think he's a superstar in the making personally. I know we've already seen him win a few, I can't remember what titles he's won, but he has won a few titles, and he's boxed a few other unbeaten guys on a decent level. But I still think that he's yet to reach that next level, and I think 2022 will be the year where it's kind of his coming out party. Because I think he's a real serious talent. He's clearly, obviously, a good boxer. Very spiteful as well. Carries a decent amount of power. So for me, Dalton Smith. And I'd like to also mention he's not even yet had his debut as a professional. But one that I'd like to mention as a potential prospect is Kurt Walker. He was a decorated amateur he boxed for Ireland as an amateur. But yeah, he's Northern Irish, and he's just signed professional with Condon Boxing. And although he hasn't yet had a professional fight, and again, obviously he won't be making any massive waves in 2022. I just think he's one to keep an eye out on because he's got all the talent in the world. He was in the Olympics there in 2022 in Tokyo. In the Tokyo Olympics there, and I think he got to the last 8. Got a really bad cut and stuff as well. So he was a little bit unlucky, but he's definitely one to watch as well. But my main one for British prospect of 2022 is definitely Dalton Smith.
Interesting. Yeah, well, that's good call, man. I think Dalton Smith, 9-0, I believe, is trained by his dad, Grant Smith, who also trains Sonny Edwards. So again, I feel like someone who's in good hands. I think my only real question for you about Dalton Smith is, would you put your neck out on the line and say he's a future world champion? Do you think he's that good?
Yeah. Without a doubt.
Yeah, straight up. Fair enough.
Yeah, straight up, no messing about. I think so, yeah.
And fair enough. Well, yeah, looking forward to seeing his journey in 2022. And Kurt Walker as well, obviously a guy that a lot of people won't be aware of, just because he's just the fact he's not had a pro fight yet. As I said, was in the Olympics. I know it's a big call to say that now, and I'm fair play to you if you're going to big someone up who hasn't had their pro debut yet. But what do you think he can achieve in his first couple of years? How highly do you rate him?
I rate him really highly, and I think he's not like he's one of these turning pro and he's only 21 or 22. I think he's mid 20s and might be around 26 or so. I could be wrong, but I think he's about 25 or 26. So although he's still really, really young, I think he might move a little bit quicker. Because he does have that amateur pedigree. So I think that, obviously, I'm not saying he's going to fight for a title in 2022, but I definitely think by 2023 or 18 months' time, he'll be, knocking on the door, potentially some big domestic fights. But yeah, he's definitely one to keep an eye out on.
Interesting. Well, all right. Well, nice mixture of prospects there, lads. I think. Well, I always enjoy looking back at these videos and seeing who was right and who was wrong. So we shall see.